The morning sun rose over the sprawling city, turning the sky from silver to gold. Ethan Cole, a self-made millionaire, adjusted his tie as he watched his mansion staff go about their daily routines. Everything in his world was perfectly controlled, except for one thing that didn't make sense: his maid, Clara. She was always polite, precise, but strangely secretive. And that morning, when she asked to leave early to take out the trash, something about her tone made him follow her. He watched from a distance as her small figure disappeared behind the back gate, carrying a black bag over her shoulder. But instead of heading toward the bins, she walked farther, down a muddy road that led to the city dump. Ethan's curiosity turned into unease. Why would a woman like her, who refused charity and never spoke about her past, visit such a place? When he reached the dump, the smell of rot hit him like a wall. He spotted her kneeling between piles of discarded things, searching for something inside a broken box. She wasn't looking for food or money. She was trembling, cradling something close to her chest, something wrapped in a worn blanket. "Clara!" he called, his voice echoing through the desolation. She froze, turning toward him with a look of pure terror. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Rain began to fall, soaking them both as he stepped closer. "What are you hiding?" he demanded softly. And then, from the folds of the blanket, a tiny cry pierced the silence. Fragile, human, alive. Ethan staggered backward, eyes wide. The woman he thought he knew had been hiding a baby in the middle of a dump. The rain came down harder, washing away the dust and the lies that had held their world together. Ethan stood motionless, staring at Clara, drenched, trembling, clutching the small bundle in her arms as if her life depended on it. He had seen betrayal, greed, even cruelty in his career, but never something like this. The child's weak cries seemed to cut through the thunder, echoing deep inside his chest. "Whose baby is that?" he finally asked, his voice shaking more than he expected. Clara's lips quivered, her eyes pleading for mercy. "Please, Mr. Cole, don't call the police. I'll explain everything. Just not here." Her words cracked, but there was something in her tone, not guilt, but desperation. Ethan didn't know whether to feel anger or pity. On the drive back, silence filled the car. The smell of rain and the soft whimpering of the baby mixed into something unbearable. He couldn't take his eyes off the rearview mirror, where Clara sat hugging the child as if shielding it from the world. She wasn't just a maid anymore, she was a mystery. That night, Ethan realized his life, once built on logic, money, and control, was about to unravel in ways he couldn't imagine. Whatever secret Clara had been hiding in the dump was far more than a scandal. It was something human, raw, and devastating. Before we dive into this powerful story of pain, courage, and redemption, take a moment to subscribe, like, and comment below the city or country where you're watching from. Your engagement helps these stories travel across the world. And someone out there might need this reminder of how compassion can change everything. The mansion was silent that night, except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Ethan sat by the fire, still in disbelief at what had happened earlier that day. The image of Clara holding that child in the rain replayed endlessly in his mind, her soaked hair sticking to her face, her arms shaking not from cold, but from fear. Every time he blinked, he saw those pleading eyes again, filled with secrets she couldn't say out loud. Clara was resting in the guest room, the baby sleeping in her arms. Ethan had told her to stay for the night, though she had resisted. "Please, sir, I don't belong here," she had whispered. But he couldn't let her go, not until he understood. There was something about that baby, something that didn't add up. The way she protected it, the way she wept. It wasn't just love. It was guilt. Hours passed before he finally stood up and walked toward her room. The door was slightly open. Inside, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, rocking the baby softly, whispering a lullaby in a language he didn't recognize. Her face, lit by the dim bedside lamp, looked peaceful for the first time that day. He hesitated, then knocked gently. She looked up, startled, clutching the child closer. "You said you'd explain," he reminded her quietly. "Tell me who that baby is." She lowered her gaze. "His name is Samuel," she said softly. "He's not mine, but he's all I have." Her voice trembled. "I found him 3 months ago, left in a garbage bag near the dump. He was barely breathing." Ethan froze. "You found him in the trash?" She nodded. "I heard a noise, like a kitten crying. I thought I was going crazy. But when I looked, I saw him wrapped in a torn blanket, blue from the cold. I couldn't leave him there." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. The firelight flickered on the walls. The rain whispered against the windows. He wanted to ask why. Why she hadn't told anyone. Why she'd risked her job and freedom for a stranger's child. But when he saw her face, he already knew the answer. "I tried to take him to the police," Clara continued, "but they said I couldn't keep him. They called him evidence of a crime. I couldn't let them put him in one of those shelters. You don't know what happens to babies there. So I ran. I started working for you soon after. I thought if I stayed quiet, no one would find out." Ethan's throat tightened. He looked at the child, small, fragile, but alive. Against all odds, she had saved him. Yet something about the story still didn't sit right. "And the parents?" he asked. "Did you ever find out who left him there?" Clara hesitated, her eyes darting toward the window. "I think I did," she whispered. "But if I'm right, telling you could destroy everything." The words hung between them like smoke, heavy, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. Ethan felt the air shift. Whatever truth she was holding back wasn't just about the baby. It was about something, or someone, far closer to home. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills, and somewhere deep within the mansion, a door creaked open. Neither of them noticed, but that sound marked the beginning of a chain of revelations that would shatter their world piece by piece. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the mansion, the wind through the trees, the ticking clock, the distant hum of rain, seemed to whisper the same question. Who left that baby to die? By dawn, he was pacing his study, his mind circling Clara's final words. "If I'm right, telling you could destroy everything." He wasn't a man who feared the truth, but now he wasn't sure he wanted to find it. When the first light broke through the curtains, he called his driver and told him to find the nearest hospital near the city dump, the kind that handled emergencies, the kind that might remember a baby brought in 3 months ago. The driver hesitated. "Sir, there are dozens of clinics near that area. It'll take time." "Then start with St. Jude's," Ethan said. "Something tells me that's the one." Hours later, he arrived there himself. The smell of disinfectant and despair filled the air. A nurse looked up from her desk, tired but kind. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm looking for information about an abandoned infant," he said. "Found near the dump a few months back." The nurse frowned. "We had one case like that, but—" She hesitated, checking her files. "The child disappeared the same day. A woman signed out pretending to be a relative. We filed a report, but the police never found her." Ethan's heart pounded. "Do you still have the file?" She nodded, sliding it across the counter. The paper smelled faintly of rain and time. The baby's photo was attached, a tiny boy wrapped in a gray blanket. Below it, a faint signature scrawled in blue ink, "Clara Moreira." Ethan stepped outside, the file shaking in his hands. The truth was undeniable now. She had broken the law to protect the child. But what haunted him most was the next page, a brief hospital note mentioning the suspected mother, a name he recognized instantly. It was the name of his late fiancée, Amelia Hart. For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. Amelia, gone for nearly a year after a sudden car accident. Or so he had believed. She had vanished the night before their wedding, leaving only a note that said, "I'm sorry, please don't look for me." Now, staring at that name linked to the abandoned baby, the room seemed to spin. Back at the mansion, Clara sensed something had changed in him. When he entered, she stood from the couch, clutching the child. "You found something," she whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. "Tell me the truth, Clara. The woman who left him, was it Amelia?" Tears filled Clara's eyes before she could answer. She sank to her knees, holding the baby tighter. "I didn't know who she was until I saw her picture in your house. That night I found her near the dump. She was still alive, barely. She begged me to save the baby. She made me promise I'd never tell anyone. She died before I could ask her name." Ethan's world cracked open. His knees gave way as he sat beside her, staring at the child, his child. Every truth he had clung to was suddenly a lie. His lost love hadn't run away. She had died alone, trying to protect their son. Clara's sobs filled the room. "I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid. I thought you'd hate me for keeping him from you." He looked at her, this woman who had risked everything for a child that wasn't hers. His voice broke. "Clara, you didn't steal him. You saved my son." For the first time in years, Ethan wept. Not as a businessman, not as a man betrayed by fate, but as a father, and as a soul humbled by love. Outside, the rain stopped, leaving only silence and the faint sound of a baby breathing softly between them, the sound of new beginnings. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the past had never really left him. Even after learning the truth, that Amelia had died protecting their son, his mind refused to rest. There were too many gaps, too many unanswered questions. Why the dump? Why had no one contacted him? And how had Clara, of all people, been there at the exact moment his fiancée took her last breath? He sat in his office, staring at the rain sliding down the window. The world outside looked as gray as the thoughts running through his head. On the desk lay the file from St. Jude's Hospital, the final record of Amelia Hart. Her last breath recorded, her body unclaimed. Ethan had been in New York that week, closing a deal worth millions, never knowing the woman he loved was dying alone. Clara entered quietly, the baby asleep in her arms. "He looks like her," she said softly. Ethan nodded without turning. "He does," he whispered. Silence filled the room, thick and unbearable. Clara hesitated, then stepped closer. "There's something else I never told you." He looked up sharply. "What more could there be?" "When I found her," Clara said, her voice trembling, "she wasn't alone. A man was there, watching from the shadows. I thought he was helping her, but when I called for help, he ran. I never saw his face clearly, but—" She stopped, her eyes darting toward the window. "I think he works for you." Ethan froze. "What are you saying?" "I saw his ring. It had your company's emblem, the same one your executives wear." The room seemed to close in around him. Every breath grew heavy. His company had thousands of employees, but only a few wore that ring, the board members, his most trusted men. One name rose immediately in his mind like a curse: Victor Harlow. The next day, Ethan called for Victor. They met in the office downtown, a sterile room full of glass and silence. Victor smiled the way he always did, calm, professional, loyal. "You wanted to see me, boss?" "Yes," Ethan said, forcing steadiness into his tone. "About Amelia." Victor's smile faded. "What about her?" Ethan threw the photo on the desk, Amelia, Clara, and the baby. "You were there," he said coldly. "At the dump, the night she died." Victor's face tightened, the lie dying on his tongue before it could form. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Ethan interrupted. "You covered it up. You hid my son from me." Victor exhaled slowly, his mask cracking. "Amelia was going to ruin everything. She wanted you to leave the company, start over with her and the baby. Do you know what that would have done to your investors? To all of us who built this empire with you?" His voice grew sharp. "She wasn't killed, Ethan. She chose that life, and it killed her." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You left her there to die," he whispered. Victor didn't deny it. "You weren't supposed to know. That's mercy, Ethan. You're welcome." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Ethan's mind burned with rage and grief, but when he looked at Victor, all he saw was emptiness. The kind that comes from realizing you'd built your life on betrayal. When Ethan returned home that night, Clara was waiting by the door. "What did you find?" she asked. "Everything," he said, his voice hollow. "And now I know why she trusted you instead of me." Outside, thunder rolled again, and this time Ethan didn't hide from the storm. He stepped into it, ready to destroy the darkness that had stolen his family. The storm outside mirrored the one raging inside Ethan's chest. The walls of his mansion felt smaller, colder, as if they too had learned of the betrayal. Every corner whispered memories of Amelia, her laughter, her scent, her promises. And now, the child she had died to protect lay asleep in the next room, unaware of the darkness that had nearly claimed his life. Clara found Ethan standing by the fireplace, staring at the flames as though they held answers. "You look like you haven't slept," she said softly. "How do you sleep when everything you believed in turns out to be a lie?" he replied. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "You told me once that you built your empire by seeing through deception. Maybe this time you were meant to see through your own." He looked at her then, really looked at her. Her eyes, tired but unbroken, held a kind of strength that humbled him. For weeks she had lived under his roof, hiding the truth to protect his son, and yet her loyalty had never wavered. "You should hate me," he murmured. "You've suffered because of my world." "I don't hate you," she said. "I pity the man who had everything and still didn't know what love looked like until it was too late." By morning, he made his decision. He called his lawyer, then the press. If Victor thought he could bury the truth, Ethan would make sure the world unearthed it. That afternoon, headlines blazed across the city. Coal industries scandal. Executive linked to cover-up in woman's death. Victor arrived at the mansion in a fury, his suit dripping from the rain. "You destroyed everything!" "No," Ethan said coldly. "You did. When you decided a woman's life was worth less than my company." Victor's voice trembled. "You think the board will forgive you? You've turned yourself into a charity case for a maid and a bastard child." The moment the words left his mouth, Ethan's fist connected with his jaw. Victor stumbled backward, blood mixing with rain. "Don't you ever speak about them again," Ethan growled. "That bastard child is my son, and that maid has more honor than you ever will." One evening, Ethan found Clara outside, standing beneath the same oak tree where she used to cry when no one was watching. The sky was painted in shades of gold and violet. He joined her quietly. "I used to think love was about owning," he said. "Now I know it's about giving." "And what do you plan to give now?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes soft. "A life worth living, for all of us." Clara appeared in the doorway, clutching Samuel tightly. "Please," she whispered. "No more violence." Ethan turned, his anger melting into sorrow. "It's over," he said softly. "He doesn't deserve another second of our pain." Victor left that night, escorted by police. The company crumbled under the scandal, but for the first time, Ethan didn't care. What he'd lost in reputation, he had gained in truth. Weeks passed. The mansion slowly transformed. Laughter returned, replacing silence. Clara worked less, smiled more. Samuel began walking, his tiny footsteps echoing through the halls that once knew only emptiness. The first drops of rain began to fall again, but neither of them moved. This time the storm didn't frighten them. It felt like forgiveness, like the world washing away the last remnants of pain, leaving only the possibility of peace. Spring arrived quietly that year. The city that once whispered gossip about Ethan Cole had moved on, its headlines fading like old scars. What remained was peace, fragile, precious peace, within the walls of a home that had finally learned to breathe again. Ethan spent more time in the garden now, planting roses where thorns once grew wild. Clara often joined him, her hands still delicate despite all they had endured. Sometimes Samuel toddled between them, his giggles brighter than the morning sun. In those moments, Ethan found himself wondering how he had ever lived without this, without them. But peace, he knew, always comes at a cost. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No sender's name, only a seal, the crest of Cole Industries. The company board had voted. Despite Victor's arrest, Ethan was to be investigated for negligence and obstruction. If convicted, he could lose everything: his assets, his home, even his right to adopt Samuel. He read the letter twice, his hands trembling. Clara found him on the balcony, staring at the horizon. "What is it?" she asked softly. He handed her the paper, his jaw clenched. "They're coming for everything. For him." "We can leave," she said. "We can disappear." He shook his head. "I ran from the truth once. I won't do it again." Days later, he stood in court. The media waited outside like vultures, flashbulbs cracking through the rain. Clara sat behind him, clutching Samuel. The prosecutor spoke of greed and corruption, but when Ethan rose to speak, his voice carried none of the arrogance he once wore. "I built an empire," he said slowly, "but I destroyed lives to do it. This woman showed me what love looks like. She risked everything to save a child that wasn't hers. A child who, as it turns out, was mine. If that's guilt, then I'll carry it proudly." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge's stern expression softened. After hours of deliberation, the verdict came. Not guilty. The empire he thought he'd lost was gone, but in its place stood something infinitely greater. Outside, as rain began to fall again, Clara stepped toward him, tears mixing with raindrops. "You didn't just save your son," she whispered. "You saved yourself." "No," Ethan said softly. "You saved me." That evening they returned home together, no longer boss and maid, but something deeper, something real. Samuel ran ahead into the garden, chasing puddles under the soft glow of twilight. Ethan wrapped his arm around Clara. "I used to think rain was punishment," he said, "but now I see its grace. It gives life where everything once died." "Then let it rain forever," she whispered. And as the heavens opened once more, the three of them stood in the garden, drenched, laughing, alive. The rain that had once hidden sorrow now washed them clean, baptizing a new beginning written not in wealth or power, but in love, loss, and the courage to begin again. The night was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. The same sound that had once marked tragedy now spoke of renewal. Ethan watched Clara and Samuel sleeping on the couch, the soft glow of the fireplace painting their faces in gold. In their peace, he saw everything he had been searching for his entire life. Not success, not control, but home. He thought of Amelia then, and for the first time, it didn't hurt. Her love had never truly left. It had simply found a new way to live, through their son, through Clara's courage, through the second chance life had quietly offered in the ruins of heartbreak. He whispered a silent promise to the woman who had started it all. "I'll take care of them. Always." Outside, the rain began to slow, turning from storm to whisper. The world was clean again, washed of lies, pride, and pain. As dawn crept across the horizon, Ethan closed his eyes, knowing that some stories don't end with loss. They end with redemption. And sometimes the rain that once broke you becomes the very thing that heals you.